This is the 3060 Ti. Awesome GPU. Great performance for the price. But is it enough to play games at 4K? Hey there, I'm TechDweeb, how you doing? Thanks for clicking on the video today. This is the GPU of my dreams. Seriously, this GPU, this exact GPU. It's the GPU I've always wanted. It's not the best GPU in the world. It's pretty good, I guess. I'm really happy with it, but I do have better GPUs. So why did I want this GPU? Why? Why? Well, that's a long story. You guys don't want to hear a long story, do you? You do? But I can't tell you the long story. That's not good for the algorithm. What if I tell you the quick version? Alright, here we go. It's 2020. The pandemic was upon us. I had my heart set on a new 30 series GPU, but I couldn't get one for reasons. I wanted a 30 series GPU so bad. I had a 1080 Ti at the time. I didn't need a new GPU, but they were shiny and new. So I wanted one, and then my friend got one. He had a new PC build and a 3060 Ti pre-ordered, so he got it right away. And I was so jealous, you guys. I just settled for a 6700 XT, and I was lucky to get that, I'll tell you that much. It was good, I guess, but I secretly hated it, because it wasn't a shiny new 30 series GPU like I wanted, like my friend had. It was just a stupid, boring AMD piece of garbage without good ray tracing or DLSS, and it didn't look cool, like my favorite GPU design, the Zotac Twin-edge. I mean, just look at this thing. Freaking badass, man. The whole pandemic, I wanted this GPU. I've been through a few GPUs since then. I've been a very lucky boy, but there was always this nagging feeling that I never actually achieved my early pandemic GPU dreams of owning this GPU. And I finally got it, and I love it. It's everything I'd hoped for. It's actually a funny story about how I got this GPU. I got a really good deal on it, but I'll tell you that story at the end of the video because we need to get to the gameplay tests in the next 4 seconds or the algorithm will punish me. So, without further delay, let's play some games. I'm running this in my PC with an i5 12400F, 16GB of 3200MHz RAM. I built this PC in a recent video. There's a link to that and full specs that are listed in the description below. Starting off with Shadow the Tomb Raider, running at 4K, obviously. We're starting with the highest preset with DLSS off. I wanted to see as a baseline if we just crank the settings. And we got 43 FPS average. Now, console players are used to running games at 30 FPS. I think this on the PS4 Pro ran at 30 FPS if you switch it to resolution mode or whatever you call it. If you switch it to performance mode, it runs at 60 frames per second, but I think it's at 1080p then or something. And then obviously on the older generation consoles, lots of games ran at 30 FPS. If you're sitting back on your couch playing a game like this on your TV with a controller, you really don't miss out on a lot of the experience by running games at, around 40 FPS, I think. 30 FPS feels a little bit low to me, but, it's playable, it's fine. I wanted to see what would happen if we lowered the settings down a little bit, so here we are running with the high preset. DLSS is still off, by the way, and we went from 43 FPS up to 48 FPS. So, you can lower the settings a little bit. The game doesn't really look that different running on high versus the highest preset. This game still looks great even at medium settings. I'd probably stay away from low though, unless you really needed to get a lot of extra performance. So yeah, this is kind of the sweet spot if you're not using DLSS, but I mean, if you have a 30 series GPU, you might as well use DLSS. DLSS is amazing, so let's try that now. We're going to go back up to the highest preset, and we're going to run it with DLSS in performance mode, and we go up to 84 FPS. Now, obviously, it depends what kind of monitor you're playing this on. If you're playing this on a high refresh rate monitor, like a 4K 144Hz monitor, then yeah, you'll probably want to squeeze out some extra performance, hence the performance DLSS. But, honestly, on a 4K display, the difference between performance DLSS and quality DLSS in terms of the visuals is barely any different. Like, I play this on my TV, it's a big, 70-inch 4K TV. It's only 60 Hz though. I play games at performance DLSS all the time, and they look great. At a resolution that high, the visual sacrifice you get by running in performance mode is pretty minimal, to be honest, especially when you're not sitting that close to the screen. Let's try an older game. This is Mass Effect Andromeda, and this is a good game. I didn't play it when it first came out, and I don't remember how this ended up in my Steam library. I probably grabbed it on some sale or something, and I installed it recently, and I'm actually really enjoying playing it. It's a great series, the Mass Effect series. I've always loved them. This is not of the same quality story as like Mass Effect 2, but it's still pretty good. And the actual big open worlds and the graphics are really nice, and the gameplay's good. So yeah, still a good Mass Effect game in my opinion. Anyways, we're running this at 4K with the Ultra preset to start out, and we get 47 FPS. Again, this is a game you sit back on your couch, you play with a controller, you're gonna be totally fine with this kind of FPS. If you wanted to get that FPS higher, you'd have to change the preset. But with this one, even when I tried some lower presets on 4K native, it didn't improve the FPS that much. You have to change the resolution scale. So here we are, running with the medium preset. It's 4K, but with 75% resolution scale, and we go up to 76 FPS. And then this looks amazing. Like, when I'm sitting back on my couch, I could not really notice a difference. This is more than 1440p. 75% of 4K is like, I don't know, it's like 1800p or something like that. So it's kind of the middle ground between 1440p and 1080p. But on games where I can't achieve 60 FPS natively, I'll go down to 1440p, no problem. I'm not a snob about this sort of thing. There really isn't much of a difference, 1440p versus 4K, especially when you're sitting back on your couch, you're running this on a big TV, 4K TV. When you're targeting 60 Hz, you don't have to sacrifice much in terms of the settings to make it run really good on a 1440p monitor. But you do have to sacrifice quite a bit to get it running really good at 4K. So that's a good trade-off in my opinion. Yeah, the visuals, they don't look that much different, and the performance difference is huge. Like the difference between playing at like 45 FPS versus 60 FPS, sacrificing a little bit of the crispness in the image, that's a trade-off I'm willing to make 9 times out of 10. And this is an older game, so it doesn't have any, upscaling features, no DLSS or FSR or anything like that. So changing the resolution scale, that's the only real way you have to sort of upscale this, so to speak. Here's some Assassin's Creed Valhalla. This is running at 4K. With the ultra high preset, we got 40 FPS. Now, this is a newer game, but it doesn't have any upscaling features built in. It doesn't have DLSS or FSR, so you're pretty much stuck with changing the resolution, the scaling, and the settings that you're running with. So running at ultra high, 40 FPS, yeah, that's fine. For a game like this, it's a controller game, it's a game you can sit back and play on your couch. It runs fine. You could totally have an enjoyable console-like experience playing this game. I personally prefer more than 40 FPS, but you can play it with this. So I'm gonna give this one a win for just running at native 4K with the highest preset. You can still play this game and get a good playable FPS. But if you wanted to increase the FPS, you could change the preset, obviously. So here we are running with the high preset, and we get 45 FPS on average. So a bit of a boost there. The high preset is 2 steps down in the preset hierarchy. There's ultra high, then ultra, and then high in this game. So you go down 2 steps, but it's not much of a change in the FPS. I mean, granted, the visuals don't look that much different. You lose some of the detail in distant objects, and actually this is a game where I do spend lots of time looking off into the distance, gazing around at the beautiful scenery, so I do notice the step down in the graphic settings. The way that I like to play this is with maybe like a high preset and with a resolution scale. So here we are running with high preset and 70% scale, and we go up to 69 FPS. Now I like to keep my FPS significantly above 60, like around 70, just so that if I get into a busy area with lots of effects on the screen, it doesn't dip too far below 60 and I don't notice big frame dips. And like I said, running at like a 70 or 75% resolution scale, that's like the middle ground between 1440p and 4K, and it really doesn't, you don't lose much. And the performance that you gain from going down to that slightly lower resolution, it's totally worth the trade-off. But this is a video about 4K gaming, and I don't know if resolution scaling should be considered 4K gaming. So if you want to run this game at 4K with ultra high preset, you'll get 40 FPS, and I think that's good to go. And you can do some resolution scale settings tweaks to get that performance up, like I tend to do when I play this game, sitting back on my couch on my 4K TV. Moving along, here's Elden Ring, running at 4K. With the max preset, the maximum settings, we get 46 FPS. And this is a game, it does require some reflexes and timing, but I don't feel like it's the kind of game that you really need a really high FPS to do good at. I don't know what this runs at on the consoles, but the game is capped at 60 FPS on the PC, so you can't go above that anyways. Obviously, the game looks amazing at these settings, and yeah, you're not sacrificing anything, really. I mean, 45 FPS, that's totally playable for a game like this, so yeah, I think this is good to go. If you wanted to squeeze out some more performance, you could go down to the medium preset, which would take us from 46 to 48. So you don't get a lot of extra performance from changing the presets that much, unless you go down pretty low in the settings. Here I am with the low preset, but I turned on the high shadows and anti-aliasing, because the shadows do some weird flickery garbage ugliness if you don't leave those on high, and they don't change the FPS very much. We go up to 59 FPS. Yeah, so we're right up at that frame rate cap, and the game, it still looks good like this. Unless you're comparing a screenshot side by side and you're like, oh, that bush doesn't look as good on the low settings as the high settings. If you're just playing the game, you don't really notice it that much. It still looks amazing. It still looks really good, especially since we got the shadows on high anyway. The shadows look good, and the differences are pretty minor. Some slightly lower texture resolution and some slightly less detail in, I don't know, the rocks or something. And you're not sacrificing very much. And you're running at native 4K here. So being able to keep it at 60 FPS frame rate cap, that's pretty cool. To be honest, when I play a game like this, I prefer making my own custom settings mix. I'll go through the settings one at a time and turn it down and turn it up and see what the difference in performance is and see what the difference in visuals are. So usually when I'm fiddling with the settings, it's like half them are on low and half them are on ultra. And I usually aim for like 50 to 60 FPS. When I do that, I find the game barely looks any different. You know, if there's a setting that really makes the game look different, it makes it look worse on low, I'll leave that on high and I'll change other ones to low to get to balance out the performance. And yeah, when I do that, the game barely looks different from the original, and that's the way I like to do it personally. I usually aim for like 50 to 60 FPS. Here's some God of War. Running at 4K with a high preset, and I went right for the upscaling because this game has two types of upscaling. It has FSR 2.0 and DLSS. So here we are first with the high preset with balanced FSR 2.0. And we get 74 FPS. Now FSR 2.0, it doesn't perform quite as well as DLSS, and it doesn't look quite as good. I think it's a little bit subjective. There are some people that are complaining about this game in particular with FSR 2.0, saying that in motion it does some weird things. I don't know. When I play on a 4K TV with like balanced FSR, it looks freaking fine to me. So maybe, I don't know, on a 1080p screen with performance FSR, you'll have some pretty bad times with the upscaling tech, but on 4K, you really have to struggle to even notice a difference. So how does that compare to DLSS? Well, here is some DLSS, running with the high preset still, and I selected performance DLSS to see how high we could get that, and we go up to 80 FPS. Now, this is obviously overkill for what I use this GPU for. I'm running this on a 4K TV with only 60 Hz, so I'd probably be playing this with the Ultra preset and maybe balanced DLSS or performance, who knows. Sometimes I select performance DLSS even though I could get away with balance, just to let the GPU run a little cooler and quieter. Not that this is a loud, hot GPU. It's a very cool running, quiet GPU, but sometimes I just prefer to take the load off the GPU, just for efficiency's sake, if you know what I mean. So, I mean, there's no reason you wouldn't choose DLSS over FSR 2.0 if you have a 30 series GPU like the 3060 Ti, but I wanted to show you how they both performed, just in case you were curious. Alright, let's do it. Here's Cyberpunk 2077. So natively, running at 4K with the medium preset, we only got 42 FPS, which is not great for a first-person shooter. If you're sitting back on your couch playing this with a controller, maybe you'll get away with a lower frame rate, like the 40s, but I don't know, man. Even when I'm sitting back on my couch for a first-person game, that's like a first-person shooter especially, I really notice the frame rate dips. I like the frame rate to be higher, like closer to 60, if not above 60. So luckily, this game has DLSS, because if it didn't, you'd have to lower the settings pretty low to get near 60. So running at 4K with the high preset with performance DLSS selected, we get 63 FPS. And this is personally how I play it. I don't bother going up to Ultra or anything like that. I don't need the game to look extra amazing. I mean, you can set the settings on this game so high. There's like a setting past Ultra called Psycho, and it just brings any system to its knees. My main PC with a 5800X and a RTX 3080 can't run this game at 60 FPS on my 1440p monitor at the Psycho settings. It's just crazy. Anyways, yeah, high settings, the game looks amazing. You hardly notice any difference between high and Ultra, and it keeps it above that 60 FPS threshold, as long as you're using DLSS. And performance DLSS, like I said, it looks totally great. You don't notice much of a difference between, say, performance and quality DLSS, at least at 4K. Lower resolutions, you definitely notice a difference. 4K is barely any different. And finally, I wanted to try this game, Forza Horizon 5. Running at 4K with the Ultra preset, we get 64 FPS. Yeah, so you can totally max out this game, crank it right to the max, run it natively at 4K, and you'll still be getting a perfectly playable 64 FPS. Yeah, I don't know, maybe if you're playing this on a high refresh rate monitor, you want a beautiful racing experience. I don't know. Hey, racing fans out there, do you guys really need above 60 FPS? For first-person shooters, I notice it a lot. For third-person shooters, I don't notice it very much. I'm not really a racing game connoisseur. I don't play racing games that much. 60 FPS feels fine to me, but I'm curious to know what you guys think. So let me know in the comments, any racing game fans out there. Is 60 FPS enough, or do you need more? Yeah, this is a really new game, and it runs completely fine on the 3060 Ti, maxed right out at native 4K. I mean, I've heard this game is really well optimized. It runs really well on a variety of systems, even older GPUs and stuff, so I guess it's not surprising. But like, dang, this game looks really freaking good. And the fact that we're running at over 60 FPS with the settings completely cranked, that's pretty freaking awesome. I wish more games spent as much of their energy and budget with optimization as much as the developers of this game obviously did, because it looks amazing and it runs so dang good. Yeah, like I said, I've been using this for a while now, so I knew going into this how these games would perform. The 3060 Ti it's a competent 4K gaming GPU. As long as you can make use of upscaling tech like DLSS and FSR, at 4K these upscalers really aren't noticeable, even in performance mode. In older games without upscaling, or newer games without upscaling, you'll have to lower the settings to get close to 60 FPS, but honestly, I prefer just to run those games at 1440p. Pretty much everything will run at 1440p with high or ultra settings on this GPU, and lots of older games will run at full 4K without issue. So I'd call this GPU the bare minimum that you need for 4K gaming. The non-TI version of the 3060 can do sub 4K, but you have to sacrifice quite a bit of the visual fidelity to make that work. This 3060 Ti gets the job done. At a great price. Oh, speaking of the price, it's actually kind of a funny story about how I got this at the price I did. I think it's funny, at least. So I've been watching the price of this GPU on Amazon because I wanted it. I got rid of my non-TI 3060 by using it in a build, and the prices for the 3060 Ti kept going down. And as I explained earlier, this was the GPU I wanted for a long time, so I was keeping an eye on it, waiting for the right moment to buy. It was $675 at first, and then it went down to $625. Then after a couple of weeks, when it finally went down to $575, I pulled the trigger. I got it, I had it for a few weeks, and I was really happy with it, but then I saw that the price went down even further, down to $510. Amazon used to have a policy where if the price of an item you recently bought went down, you could get a rebate for the price difference. They stopped doing that though, but I could return it for free and then buy it again. I guess Amazon prefers you just to return it and buy it again rather than give you a rebate. I don't know. So that's what I did. I returned it, intending to buy it again, but I didn't buy it again right away. I had some other GPUs to test for videos, and I kind of wanted to see if it would go lower in the price. And after about a week, I went to buy buy it again. The price wasn't lower, it was still at 510 bucks, but I saw there was an open box version available through the Amazon warehouse for 470 bucks. So I bought that. And when I got it, there was something really familiar about the way it was packaged. I'm 99% sure that the card I ended up getting was the same exact card that I sent in as my return. I'm pretty sure because when you buy the card new, it had the little pieces of paper on top of the GPU, but when I returned it, I shoved that underneath the foam, and when I got the new GPU, they were still underneath the foam. So yeah, I'm really confident in saying this is the exact GPU that I had returned. So I went from paying 575 bucks to 470 bucks. I saved over 100 bucks right there by sending the GPU back and then having them send it back to me. Felt pretty cool, not gonna lie. Anyways, that brings us to the end. The 3060 Ti is a good GPU for 4K gaming, in my opinion, but I'm curious to know what you think. Is this level of performance enough to call this a 4K GPU? What about the FPS? If it could do 4K at 40-ish FPS, is that good enough? Or do we need a true 4K GPU to be able to do 60 FPS at high settings? Or upscaling like DLSS? If it could do 4K with upscaling, does that mean it's a 4K GPU? I'm kind of on the fence with questions like this, so I'd love to know your opinion in the comments below. And while you're down there, click the thumbs up button if you liked the video, or the thumbs down button if you didn't. Smash the subscribe button and tickle the little bell icon so you don't miss any of my amazing videos. As always, I'm TechDweeb. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.
Help!